talked on the phone a little bit. Um, I'm just curious how you got to where you are. Like, what's your story as far as an artist from where you started to where you're at?
I mean, I went to art center right out of high school, and I took 2 years straight of illustration and freehand art. Um, I I went to Rio Hondo afterwards, and I finished up my classes there. And um, I kind of started I started fairly young doing t-shirt art and stuff like that. And so right out of high school, I was doing that. Um, I started getting into a lot of other stuff like graffiti, and I started getting into, I mean, I was in it throughout high school, and I was doing a lot of stuff that I probably shouldn't have been doing, but
Yeah.
I got involved with a lot of people that I felt at the time were there for my best interest. You know what I mean? They were like what we would consider homies, and you'd have all these people around you that they feel so like passionate about what you're passionate about. In this instance, we were passionate about graffiti, writing, bombing, whatever, and it became more like an obsession for me to go out, and my cousin, he lived with me, so he was my roommate. My parents took him in, and we bunked up, and in our room we were just, man, mom, we had graffiti on everything. Drove my mom nuts. But
In the house?
in the house, yeah, we would write on our furniture, like, I mean, like the dresser you have behind you right now. Like I would, we would grab our mean streaks and just go to town, and we would split them and combine colors, and I mean, we would make our own. It was just a mess. And at the end of the day, this room exactly, this very room here that I'm in right now was our graffiti room until we were forced by the landlord to actually paint it.
Oh, you lived in a house like you owned, you were renting it?
Yeah, oh yeah. And so like every furniture that we had, we would, man, it was an obsession for us. So anyway, so we got to this point where, at least in my world, like I didn't know what to do with my art because I went to school for it, but at the time I thought that I can bring it into the I could just do something. I wanted to do something with it, but I didn't know what to do with it. So then long story short, I met my wife, and then like what's it called? Life started happening. You know what I mean? Like reality check. Everything started moving faster, and we had our first son and our second son, and I started working at an insurance company. You know what I mean? Out of all places, and I worked at casualty claims, and so that deals with a lot of death and and accidents and stuff. So I've been doing that for a long time. So going from art to insurance was something that is like a fish out of water, you know what I mean? And if you've ever, or anyone out there has ever worked in an environment where you feel like you don't belong there, and you hear this story constantly where either you're a musician or an artist or a dancer, and you're working at some place that you're just so you're just so out of place. So that's exactly what I felt like. But because I had a family, I almost felt like I had no choice because I had to take care of them. You know what I mean? And so a responsibility started coming about and stuff. And so a lot of different things were going on in my life that were constantly changing and growing in my environment personally, that I started gradually start letting go of stuff. You know what I mean? And so, there's a lot of stuff that went on in the beginning of my career, and that didn't have to do with art. And so I think I lost a lot of time. Doing things that I probably shouldn't have been doing, and I got busted for it. I had a juvenile hall thing going on, and I had a PO officer assigned to me by the courts, and a lot of that stuff really brought a sense of like, what am I doing with my life? And I was making my family go and stuff. And so so the cool thing about it was that my PO officer made a deal with me, and he had told me that that he couldn't be my mentor because he was in a mentorship program at my high school at the time when I got in trouble early before I got married. So he showed me about Disney Studios and stuff and all this stuff during my graffiti time, and that's kind of how I started leaving it a little bit and just kind of gradually figuring out like I could do something with it. But I also had a family, like a dad that wasn't very supportive of art, because during that time was like probably like the mid 90s, early like like mid 90s, 96, 97, 98, around there. And during that time, we didn't really have schools like we do now. Like there's schools of art popping around everywhere, and
Oh,
there's
yeah,
tons of
yeah.
there's so
Everywhere.
many there's so many students now that, I mean, when you think about it, it's like the overwhelming amount of students that there is right now versus what we had when I was in high school. There's not a lot of art students that were back then, you know what I mean?
Right,
So
right.
now it's like there's a dime a dozen. There's tons of students. I mean, there's schools popping everywhere, from concept design school to private schools that are held by, you know, professional industry artists. You know, you
Yeah,
still have the
there's online ones, there's brick and mortar ones, yeah.
so there's tons of stuff. So for me, it was like, you know, I came from that world where it was all about Prismacolor pencils and Prisma markers.